Test. Ah, test. Okay. Right.
It's testing.
Test on two.
Right, we're not starting yet. We'll start in about 5 minutes. We're just testing the setup. And if you could kindly move up front, if you can, to fill up the front row before the back. And I'd also like to thank you all very much for staying until the very end. Much appreciated. Yeah, we'll just give it 5 more minutes. Thanks. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to the closing session. May you please all take your seats so we can start and then we can finish a little bit early. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the closing of the 12th annual meeting of the Internet Governance Forum. We will first have, from the host country, a closing speech by Ms. Christina Marti Lang, Deputy State Secretary, Ministry for Foreign Affairs of the Swiss Confederation. Thank you, Ms. Lang.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be here with you today at this closing ceremony of the 12th Internet Governance Forum. I would like to thank everyone who was involved in the organization of this event, the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs, the United Nations Office and the IGF Secretariat based here in Geneva, as well as my esteemed colleagues from the Federal Office of Communications and the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs for their tireless efforts to render this event successful. My special thanks also go to all of you. It was because of you that this platform was filled with innovative ideas. Thanks to you, the IGF has evolved into a relevant policy format. Ladies and gentlemen, the IGF is indeed a very special and unique event. Its agenda is not developed top-down by the host country or the IGF Secretariat. It is the result of a bottom-up and multi-stakeholder approach. The issues that we have been discussing over the past 3 days have made it on the agenda because you wanted them to be addressed and deemed these topics important. We can be very proud that this meeting allowed for such a comprehensive and inclusive discussion. Not only were we vocal about the social, economic, and political benefits of ICTS and the opportunities they have brought about for each and every one of us, but we have also addressed transnational challenges. During the World Summit on the Information Society Plus 10 process in 2015, the UN General Assembly decided to extend the mandate of the IGF for another 10 years. With this, the IGF stepped into a new second phase. The number of issues discussed and the number of participants has increased. In Geneva, we have had over 2,000 on-site participants from around 120 countries. In addition, through remote participation, which is now an integral part of the IGF, interested people from all over the world were able to join the discussions. The ongoing work of the IGF, also between the annual meetings, supports the global effort to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, many of which relate in one way or another to the Internet and information and communication technologies. I am particularly honored that this edition of the IGF was held in Geneva, an inspiring venue hosting over 30 international and intergovernmental organizations, hundreds of NGOs, and just as many further agencies that work on and with digital issues. I am pleased to say that we have moved a big step forward in strengthening the IGF at the beginning of its second mandate. Here in Geneva, at the IGF, experts from a multitude of fields of internet governance and cybersecurity have met and had a unique opportunity to break the silos and start more intense cross-country and cross-sector cooperation. This allows us to identify new ways to tackle challenges and find new and practical ideas to overcome the problems we all face in the cyber realm. That is why the IGF is, in our view, the world's most important global platform for a free, open and inclusive dialogue on all aspects of internet and digital governance with all stakeholders on an equal footing. Under the title, Shape Your Digital Future, you have discussed subjects that influence our daily lives on a political, economic and social level. In over 200 different sessions, you have debated on various topics such as cybersecurity and cybercrime, digital human rights, sustainable development and the digital economy. You have addressed some of the frontier issues such as blockchain technology, cryptocurrency or artificial intelligence. You have come to the conclusion that digitization has brought about positive developments. It has offered a myriad of new opportunities for societies, businesses and governments. Furthermore, the digital space has become a powerful driver for human rights. Throughout the discussions, it was mentioned that cyber capacity building is crucial, and the Geneva Initiative on Capacity Development in Digital Policy was announced. An initiative that aims at harvesting the experience in Geneva and Switzerland and making it available to legal, technical, social and political communities working on digital issues. You have also addressed the downside of new technologies, namely that they can be used for criminal and malicious espionage or military purposes, and misused to influence public opinions through disinformation and propaganda. In addition, the rising number and sophistication of cyber attacks has had destabilizing effects on international peace, stability, and security. What has reiterated during this IGF is that the governance of the digital space is dispersed across many actors. You have acknowledged that the internet as an infrastructure is a very complex space with only a small central core. Most of the activities and regulatory mechanisms are distributed across the network. At the same time, these activities are all interconnected. Consequently, there can't be one single solution or one single actor to find and implement solutions to the challenges we face. The dialogue and cooperation between all stakeholders, be it governments, the private sector, civil society, academia, or the technical community, needs to be further developed. Only in this way will we be able to successfully seize the opportunities cyberspace offers and to reduce the risks that it brings. Many governments have recognized this and have engaged in efforts to approach civil society and the private sector with a view to developing a range of initiatives and processes together. When it comes to cybersecurity, it is sometimes believed that governments have the dominant say in making important decisions. Switzerland doesn't agree with this view. The promotion of overall cybersecurity needs the cooperation of everyone involved. When looking for common standards and norms, rules and principles of responsible behavior in cyberspace, a focus on governments only may not be the best way to proceed. While there are already existing processes on state behavior, there is no coordinated process for the behavior of the private sector and individual users. There is also poor understanding of how the different stakeholders should interact in order to maintain a peaceful, open, stable, and secure cyberspace. It is against this backdrop that Switzerland plans to launch an initiative that will examine and clarify the roles and responsibilities of states, private companies, and individuals in cyberspace, as well as the possibilities and limits of their behavior and interaction. We hope that the result would then form the Geneva model for responsible behavior in cyberspace. Finally, I would like to share with you some of the so-called Geneva messages that have been drafted in close cooperation with the host country, the IGF Secretariat, and the main session organizers. They represent an innovation for the global IGF already tested in other national and regional IGFs. They capture key findings that we have gained from the high-level and main sessions. Some of the Geneva messages are the following. The ideal future digital global governance should be value-based, inclusive, open, and transparent. While it is challenging to determine values that can be shared by all stakeholder groups and at a global level, there was common ground in the thought that core Internet values are and need to stay human-centered. Multi-stakeholder cooperation is key in making sure that we, as a society, use the digital space to the test and the best of our abilities. While the digital future is characterized by uncertainties and facing the unknown is a challenge, relying on long-term principles such as accountability and transparency, combined with having flexibility in implementing and finding tailor-made solutions to face new challenges, would be the most appropriate way forward. The digital economy depends on the free flow of data, which should be balanced with data protection. Governments, private companies, and civil society should work together on basic sets of rules that allow data aggregation and data flows, while also protecting the integrity of data and the privacy of individuals. All the Geneva messages are available online on the IGF website and will be included in the host chair summary report. They are an attempt to enhance the impact of the IGF, reflecting the full diversity of opinions on key policy issues and contributing to having more tangible and visible IGF outcomes. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, a lot of work still lies ahead of us. The political challenges are huge. So are the rewards. Cross-sector dialogue and international cooperation are essential for an open, free, accessible, stable, and secure cyberspace. Let us further use and strengthen the IGF, which offers an excellent platform to achieve this common goal. I thank you indeed for your efforts, and I wish you a good remainder of this conference and a safe journey home.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lang. We are very grateful to the Swiss Confederation for hosting the meeting. We will now have the IGF 2017 Taking Stock and Open Mic session, and it's going to be chaired by the MAG Chair, Ms. Lynn Saint-Amour, with the 2017 MAG Host Country Co-Chair, Ambassador Thomas Schneider. And also on stage is Mr. Armin Plum, Senior Program Management Officer, Division of Sustainable Development from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA. The IGF Secretariat falls under UNDESA in the UN system. Thank you.
Thank you, Chengetai, and indeed add my thanks as well to Mrs. Lang and the Swiss Confederation for all their support over this last year. I think Thomas and I both said we would not make any introductory comments at this point in time, but move right into the taking stock session. This is where we really want to hear from the community on any matters of importance to you. And I might actually just ask once more if those that are sitting towards the back and the far sides of the hall might not want to move into the middle of the room. Certainly the dialogue and discussion would feel a little more intimate, and you'll actually get to talk to some of your colleagues perhaps as well in the interim. So we have 3 mics set up there in the aisles. We will just rotate across the mics. I will give everybody a minute to start a queue. It usually takes just a minute, some brave soul, and then they fill up, and there we go. So you have the floor. Could you, when you take the floor, just introduce yourself and the stakeholder group, and if appropriate, the organization you're with as well. Subi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Subi Chaturvedi. I head Public Affairs for the Cellular Operators Association of India, a former member of the MAG. I speak in my personal capacity. Thank you very much, Chair. It truly gladdens my heart. I know I have a minute to speak. I'll keep my remarks well within time. As a former MAG member, when you look back, you bask in glory, and you look at the reflections and what you once believed was possibly the best IGF ever when we were working towards the renewal of the mandate, and you experience these 4 days, and then you realize this is why you want to be here each time you come to the IGF. There is no other platform other than the IGF which is truly multi-stakeholder. And I say this in all trueness of my spirit. When you get to engage with governments, the youth, different voices, what we've really taken away is the IGF's and that only reinforces my faith in the platform when you see this happen year after year, year after year. I've heard conversations on what does the IGF really do? Is it just a talk shop? Is this just a coffee shop? Are we just having conversations? I want to reinforce the fact that there are no binding recommendations. It is amazing to see best practice fora take full form, take this conversation to the next level. What I would also like to see is we've seen over the last year recent attacks, WannaCry, ransomware. We've learned more than ever before that government is also an equal stakeholder at the table. So the declaration that came out of the Commission, which talks about not attacking the core internet, and we've just spoken to that, if we can reinforce and re-articulate that, that is something that I would truly look forward to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Subi. Renata, you have the floor.
Hi, Renata Aquino, MAG member from civil society. And this year we had a meeting with prospective MAG members. This was a great initiative. We need to create transition between the MAG members. It would be great if we could bring back to the stakeholder groups the names of the prospective MAG members. Stakeholders have their processes of representation, and it is important that this is respected. Still, once more, I would like to congratulate those responsible for this meeting and look forward for collaboration with these actors who are community members mostly, and it's very important that they continue to be engaged. One other point I would like to talk about is remote participation. I have tried to work with this year in the IGF. Unfortunately, a best practice forum in remote participation was not approved. It was approved, the BPF in local content for underserved regions. I find it offensive that the name of those who need to be included is actually used for exclusion of a theme that should be more dealt with. It was also proposed that this exclusion remains for years to come, in an orchestrated forever approval of this work. Some have opposed this, remembering that we need due process and at least giving the new MAG an opportunity to have choices. The people who need accessibility also have struggled since they can't have access to local number due to the type of Cisco license in place. Private sector should step up to this ask and coordinate with the extensive work done by the Dynamic Coalition in Accessibility and Disabilities. There was tremendous effort to improve remote participation in the IGF. We should all be happy for that, but we should continue to do more and more, having the IGF community in mind and not the goals of one type of organization or work. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. And that's actually a good reminder as well. And in fact, we do have Anya, who's actually managing the queue for all those people that are participating online. So we will rotate through the queue, and Anya will signal if there is somebody online. Vint, you have the floor.
It's Vint Cerf from Google. I just wanted to draw attention to the Day Zero events, which I continue to find very helpful in preparation for the remainder of the meeting. But in particular, I wanted to draw attention to the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace and their introduction of a notion of norms, which are not necessarily mandated, they're not necessarily regulated, But they certainly, I think, draw our attention to practices that we might all want to adopt. And the particular concern about the core of the internet, the public internet, I found to be a very important notion to introduce into the IGF dialogues. I want to urge that we continue to pursue paths along those lines. There are things that we can take away from IGF and actually do something about.
That's a very good point. And of course, there are many ways to actually begin producing more concrete outputs, and that's a very key one. So go back over here to this mic. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to compliment everyone for an excellent IGF and very inspiring discussions that I've been having to participate in this year. So thank you all. This is coming forward from a best practice proposal working on the format of the IGF and strengthen cooperation. That turned into a Day Zero event and then research around it that was supported by 10 different organizations. I'm not going to go into it in depth because there will be a report published somewhere early next year. I want to take two things from it. First is that people have been asking for more focus on specific topics and a process that leads to a better prioritization, which allows for interaction and cooperation from different stakeholders that may now not be present. Another thing that came out of it was using other platforms, and I think Mr. Sir's example is very good about the Global Forum presenting itself here, but also the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, reaching out saying, how can we use each other's best practice developments in a better way by interacting in another way than we're doing so far. I think that are the two main points. There will be many more. And the last thing I would like to say is, why is the IGF so bad at celebrating its successes? Look at the best practice forum, what comes out of it, the results they have, and nobody seems to be talking about it, or except in a way they don't do anything. Well, they do. The examples are out there, and how can we make sure they're on our website, they're shared through the different stakeholder communities. And please, next year, let the MAG members take a 100% responsibility for the topics they prioritize, because then they will rain down and trickle down into their communities. So I think there's excellent work being done, and there's ways for improvement, and I hope to be engaging with you all on that later this year. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. And we'll go to the gentleman in the middle queue.
Yes, my name is Royston Flood. I'm president of a United Nations accredited NGO focused on self-sustaining solutions in health, education, and enterprise. And I'm also one of the senior leadership of Rotary International. And you probably are aware we moved our Rotary Day from New York to Geneva with outstanding success linking into the Geneva communities. We're particularly interested in how we use the internet to connect people in self-assembling dynamic networks whilst encouraging individuality and promoting growth, whilst also protecting human rights and allowing organisations, individuals and communities to develop in the future. And this has been a very interesting event, and thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Sir, you have the floor.
Hello, my name is Gonzalo López Barajas. I work for Telefónica and private sector. I would like to raise our concern from the private sector on the workshops selection process. Basically, if we look at the numbers, 60% of the workshops that have been selected are from civil society, and the rest is pretty much evenly split among the rest of the three other stakeholder groups, businesses, governments, and academia. But even if we do a further analysis and we look, for example, at the business workshops that have been selected, all of those workshops are dealing with sustainable development goals, green environment, closing the digital divide, gender gap, and all the issues which are relevant for all of us, and we are very happy to address. But also means that businesses are not able to select the topics that are relevant for us, which are business-related issues, and we are not able to put those topics across the tables. And if we look at the workshops that have been taking place, for example, I was at a workshop on submarine cables, and surprisingly, all the panelists were from civil society and academia, and we had no government representatives, neither business representatives. And I wonder who actually is really working with submarine cables. Talking about this with other private sector fellows, they had this same issue and other workshops where basically governments and businesses were not represented in the panels. And we did a fast check on the workshops, the description of the workshops that were available on the website. And many of them did not have any representatives included in the description of the workshops from the business community, neither from governments. So I would kindly suggest or ask the IGF Secretariat to look into the workshops numbers and to see and do an analysis and have a check if there has been really a workshop that has been represented, that workshops have been represented all the stakeholder groups, and make some numbers around that. And to finish with a more positive tone, I would like to congratulate for the opening session. I think the format this year has been very attractive and very, very interesting for all, and I would recommend to have this format as a best practice and that is taken on upcoming IGFs and maybe improved. But I think this year the opening has been a great. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just address quickly one or two of the comments you made. Certainly I'll try and start from the beginning. Certainly civil society participants do make up the greatest percentage, both of participants here, also of submitters for workshop proposals. One of the things the MAG does do when we go through and select, which is a process where we take the 300-odd workshop proposals that come in, they're split across 55 MAG members, they come back in having been evaluated against a set of criteria, and then are aggravated. We actually look at the percentage of selection on a whole host of different criteria to certainly ensure that there's been no imbalance injected in the MAG process with respect to the amount submitted. What we haven't done is kind of positively correct if we think that one particular area is underrepresented. We do look for that, but I don't think the MAG has sort of fully agreed that we should do something that much more corrective, if you will, because this is a bottom-up process. So certainly one way to get more workshop proposals submitted would be to, here present at the IGF, would of course be to submit more proposals. I think we also need to look at how we categorize them by stakeholder. I think often civil society takes the pen, but they're still very multi-stakeholder, and perhaps attributing them to one stakeholder group isn't perhaps as kind of refined as it could be. To the other point about some of the workshops not being fully multi-stakeholder, that is, of course, a criteria for a workshop to be selected here. So I know I and the MAG, and certainly the Secretariat, would appreciate any specific examples, and we did note yours, that we can take forward and evaluate and try and understand whether that's something that slipped through our process, or perhaps at the end of the day there was a last-minute withdrawal or something similar. But we will definitely go away and look at that. It is obviously critically important to us that the workshop sessions we hold here are, in fact, multi-stakeholder. And I think that hit most of your questions. If there's any others, do please follow up or send an email. So that was that queue over there. So we'll go to this queue over here.
Thank you. Norbert Bolo, JustNet Coalition, which is a civil society coalition. I have two comments that I would like to make also about workshops. One comment related to the earlier comment about business participants. We organized a workshop, and the business speaker, the business panelist, canceled on the day before the registration deadline, and we were frantically trying to find a replacement, and then the deadline hit, and we were not dead. It was still a very good workshop. But so apology to the business community that we did not manage to get that fixed. My comments are that especially when workshops are good and the conversation is good and inspiring, it would be really nice to be able to continue that on into a more long-term discourse, and I'm finding that challenging. One particular challenge this year is that I still don't know when and where the next IGF will take place, and that makes it kind of difficult to talk with colleagues. Will you be there? Can we do a session together? And another idea would be if there is some kind of hosted process that allows you to use parts of the discussion results from a workshop to solicit further comments, or perhaps create a discourse process emerging from a workshop so that something more long-term happens, which could involve follow-up workshops or which could eventually result in the development of a joint paper or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe I'll address one of your comments right now so as not to leave everybody in suspense. Indeed, we are not yet ready to announce a host for the 2018 IGF. There were a couple of false starts earlier in the year. We have a number of very strong candidates. Those discussions are progressing, and we're very hopeful that we'll be able to announce that in January. On the plus side, we have somebody committed for 2019, and we have very, very strong commitments from a number of countries for 2020 and 2021. We've all said before that we would like to be out 2 to 3 years with respect to the IGS and the host, which would allow a better preparatory process towards those discussions. And with the exception of the short-term difficulties around 2018, we are well on our way and would expect by the middle of next year to have the next 2 or 3 actually identified. So I hope that answers some of the many questions I know Chengetai and I have been receiving this week. We're working it very hard, and we're certainly very grateful to those countries that are actually stepping up and working towards hosting for next year. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Khalid Ibrahim from the Gulf Center for Human Rights. I am a civil society activist from Iraq. I have a few comments. I will try to say them all very quickly. The first one, I would like to raise my concern about the underrepresentation of the MENA region. Almost we are the same faces. We are coming IGF after IGF. I know that we have problems in our region. The lack of network neutrality, the ongoing attacks on online activism and activists. But still, the international institutions, the IGF, could do more for us. I think it will be a good idea to create a fellowship scheme that will be specially directed to countries in which we have problems of the lack of access and free internet. In this way, we could get our youngsters to access the IGF. The second comment is about the Arab IGF. And me, as a civil society activist, I would like to say that we are not consulted at all. Last year, they canceled the IGF. Why? In what process? We don't know. We are not consulted at all. Me and some other colleagues that I have who are working actively in the region, now they are deciding about the common IGF, and also without any consultation with civil society activists. Now, I want them to know that we are really not their enemies. We just want to help them. We want to organize a better Arab IGF that will address the issues. The last comment is about the workshops. Always, whether it is in the Arab IGF or in the global IGF, our workshop will be placed in the last hour, in the last day. Kindly, next IGF, try to change that. It is not fair for us just to be the last workshop and the last day. And I have one thing on behalf of my colleagues who didn't receive the Swiss visa and didn't make it here. Kindly, when you choose a country, try to see if the visa is a simple process for people who are coming from overseas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just, point out that, of course, the national and regional IGF initiatives are independent and autonomous activities within the IGF ecosystem. So if there's something generally we can do with helping to support, we're happy to do that. But those discussions take place within regions or within nations. There are a set of criteria that NNRI must follow to actually be recognized as an IGF initiative. And that's 3 out of the 4 stakeholder groups actively involved in the steering committee of the initiative, as well as, of course, in the planning of any events. So I would hope that that certainly helps your discussions going forward. Again, if we can help with any other general information, we're very happy to do that. We have, if you don't mind, somebody online, which we will come to just now, and then we'll come back to the queue there. Anya, and if I could ask everybody to say their names slowly, pronouncing them quite carefully, that will actually allow us to have a transcript that identifies the speaker rather than simply member of the audience. Anya?
So this is Mike Nelson with Cloudflare. It's Nelson, N-E-L-S-O-N, Cloudflare, F-L-A-R-E. And I'm calling in from Washington, where I've been watching IGF all week, usually at 4:30 in the morning. Very grateful to have the chance to participate remotely. I would say there have been some challenges this year, unlike last year, when this year some of the sessions were not broadcast in real time. But when they were, WebEx worked very well. I was able to speak in a number of sessions. I wanted to make a radical suggestion. If there is no host that steps forward for next year, perhaps we should have a virtual IGF and hold it in cyberspace. The model might be what the Internet Society did with its inter-community session. They held a 27-hour virtual video conference. The different chapters in different regions hosted an hour at a time. We could do the same with the national and regional IGFs. And we could actually involve a much larger community. We could get a huge amount of attention, and we could also involve higher level people who could participate without having to fly to some corner of the world. Maybe there will be a host country, but it would host the virtual event rather than trying to convene 2,000 or 3,000 people in one place. Another quick point about remote participation, we might consider having the remote moderators not only follow what's being said online, but actually contribute to the Twitter updates, try to provide some kind of live streaming where that wasn't being done by members of the audience. The Twitter stream has been very rich this year, but there hasn't been a lot of back and forth. It's mostly been people, commenting on things. And I think the remote moderators could be part of that. I also want to pick up on the theme that we heard earlier about celebrating our successes and publicizing the contributions of the IGF much better. I think the best practices forum are very important, and while they have an impact on the small circle of people who are very closely tuned into these issues, they don't have the broader impact that might be had if the media picked up on it. Former MAG members like myself might actually be able to push out some of the best results if we had a concerted campaign to identify messages and things. The last thing I would urge the best practices forums to consider is doing some kind of scorecard or comparisons, and really, rather than writing about principles and writing about goals and analyzing the problem, let's actually give letter grades to the different activities that are helping to address the problem elsewhere, and highlight the things that are working best, and also talk about worst practices, things that haven't worked. My last comment has to do with my frustration that sometimes the IGF workshop process focuses so much on diversity that we have panels that have many accents, we have all the stakeholders represented, they're coming from different places, and they all say the same thing. And I think we really have a problem because this year I heard panels where 7 people all said the same thing, and then the next day, the same topic, 4 other people all said the opposite thing. We didn't mix the panels enough. And this goes to the point that we need to get more business people involved and a little bit more effort to get the technical community involved to make sure we have different viewpoints. And I also think we could do a little bit more to make sure we have some last-minute additions to the program that address the most, the lightest issues that have popped up. One of the things that has gotten a lot of attention here in the United States was the riots in Charlottesville, which led to a lot of focus on neo-Nazi websites. We had some good panels on that topic, but it could have been that we would have already picked the program and not been able to address one of the hottest topics here in Washington and around the world. So thanks again for a great session. Thanks for all the people doing the remote participation, and thanks for the chance to be part of the discussion today.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you for your dedication, too, for it's not the easiest to participate online, and particularly not when you're starting in the middle of the night. Sir, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Vladimir Radunovic from Diplo Foundation. I hope it was slow enough. First of all, I really want to thank Switzerland for hosting this excellent IGF, but not only that, for all the support to the IG process in the previous years. And I think it's even more important than this particular IGF. Couple of points. Remote participation. It has been mentioned a couple of times. As a former MAG member, I always try to reiterate this is not just a service. It is really a mean of participation, and we need to invest more in this process. And I do want to join Michael with thanking all the remote moderators, which did a great job, these young people. Secondly, and of course, Switzerland, who actually brought them. Secondly, capacity building. We've been talking about it very much, and I want to reiterate one thing, and that is the sessions for newcomers, which were organized, but never in the previous years we actually managed to do it properly. So I think don't give up. That's a message for the new MAG members. Don't give up on that. It's really important. But then maybe a proposal. We used to have at some of the regional IGFs like Eurodig in some of the previous years, not recently, a comprehensive capacity building program which was anchored to the IGF. And that's a proposal to try to do in the next year, and certainly when Germany takes over, a comprehensive year-round program, capacity building program with a mix of institutions that are doing that. That means that also we need a commitment, financial commitment to do that. And this is particularly important. And lastly, the fellowships. In some of the previous years, we actually had much more opportunities for fellowships. In the recent years, apart from a couple of high-star institutions, we didn't see that much commitment to bring, especially young, new people from developing countries, including governments. That's also missing, and that's linked to the capacity building programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Saliu Mansoure. I'm from Sierra Leone. This is my first global IGF. I've participated in a lot of the regional ones. Again, I have to go back to where a few contributors have lamented on the issue of multi-stakeholder. I came here expecting that there will be a lot more government, a lot more business, and more so the technological area, because in us trying to shape the digital future, we need to have everyone on board. And I think in one of the sessions in which the UNESCO director participated, they talked about indicators. And that's one thing I'm taking back, because for our next IGF in Sierra Leone, we're going to have quotas, because just as you've heard before, civil society has kind of, I wouldn't want to use the term, taken over, but they seem to be in more larger numbers. So we would want to ensure that if at the next IGF we have in Sierra Leone, and also for West Africa, we will ensure that we drag in the government, we drag in business, and the technological society also should be dragged in. Again, my second issue is on the issue of bridging the digital divide. There were a few sessions on that, but one thing that came out in one of our sessions is that there is going to be a ceiling that we're going to hit in another year or so, because if we cannot break that illiteracy issue globally, you cannot get those people online, because the technology is only for literates. It is not for those that are illiterate, because all of these technological companies, they just focus on literates. And we have to adopt at some point, whether it's at UN or others, that illiteracy is a disability. Just as someone who cannot see, someone who cannot read is disabled. So we need to adopt that and move on. But there's going to be that ceiling. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It certainly has been a goal to increase participation from the private sector, from governments, and from senior policymakers generally for some years now. I think we're making some progress in at least one of those categories. We have a lot more work to do, though, and we are open to any suggestions, programs, ideas. So feel free to send those along. And if I can just remind everybody as well that the first physical MAG meeting should be sometime February or March. We start each one of those with a one-day open community consultation. So to send in your ideas, to participate in that consultation, to send your ideas in ahead of time to myself or to the Secretariat will all help inform the work of the MAG over the years to come. So please don't hesitate to do that, and don't wait. You can do that now, or in fact get ready for the open community consultation. Chengetai is just reminding me, and he certainly is very free to take the mic himself, that we actually have a process for written contributions to come in specifically, and we can make sure that that's really visible on the IGF website as well. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Emilia Givropoulou, and I'm a Digital Policy Advisor for the Green CEFA Group in the European Parliament, but currently I'm speaking on my own capacity. So first of all, I would like to thank you all, every person that was involved in the organization of IGF. It was my first IGF experience, and I enjoyed it very much. However, I would like to draw your attention, everyone's attention actually, on a specific issue that I believe that wasn't adequately addressed during the IGF during these 5 days. There were some questions raised by the audience and some concerns, and I really hope that I can see these in the summaries that will be published in the following months. So it's about a policy issue being discussed now in Europe, and it's about the copyright reform. And I believe the copyright reform as being discussed right now, it attacks the core issues of the internet as we know it today. It attacks our freedom of expression, our freedom to access information, our privacy, data protection. It attacks small enterprises, journalists, and us, the users, most of all. One word only on these. It's in case someone doesn't know already. So Article 11 of this reform introduces a new neighboring right for news publishers, which may cover also snippets and hyperlinks. And Article 13 imposes an obligation to platforms hosting content to deploy filtering tools for upload, for any upload that's going online. And I believe that these issues should have been addressed more, not only by the audience, but also by the panelists. And that was my only issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Lynn. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrea Sachs. I feel like I should turn around and face the room, but you got me there. Okay, great. And I am the coordinator for the Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability. And I also am the chairman of the Joint Coordination Activity on Accessibility and Human Factors in the ITU. And every year, we're always going to have problems with access. Every year, the Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility gets their sleeves up and tries to solve them. And Chengetai is great, takes a lot on. Lynn, you understand what's going on. And we have made some successes. This is a particularly difficult venue, as we have discovered. But my main concern in deciding to speak at this moment in time was that the positive raving of WebEx, I can't take it. WebEx does not work for blind people. It simply does not. I want to let everybody know that the ITU is testing other remote participation tools, and we'll make that information available. I think we have to change or give a really healthy nudge to Cisco, who is responsible for WebEx, to say, come on, redesign, do something. We are conscious of the financial implications of this, and I will just mention one as an example. Zoom does not cost anything, and we've been talking about that, haven't just briefly, Changi Tai. So we're going to help to see if we can find a better remote participation tool, which ought to put the scare into Cisco, and we do know that they generously donate the license. But if it doesn't work, it isn't really great. But I do want to say that IGF does listen to us, but the venues make sometimes the choices that we have to make a bit difficult. One of the things I wanted to point out was about Mexico. They had a load of university volunteers that could help. Lynn, you pushed a wheelchair today, didn't you? You did indeed. And if we could be conscious of that, if we ever have to be here again, that we get a hold of every student who could do a credit on that to come and help us here. That would be great. We had a little difficulty with the registration thing, but I went in with my big stick and they listened. It was fine. So we are going to update the DICAD guidelines. We also took those guidelines and made them into proper papers at the ITU. We're upgrading those as well. So we know that people care in the IGF, and a lot of people have mentioned accessibility and disability in some of the sessions I've sent in. But everybody's subject is impacted by those people who have a disability of all kinds. And I would like everyone in this room to take back to their countries how they can assist persons get online. And we do include literacy, because whether you have it from a disease or you never got to go to school, he's absolutely right. That's a disability. And thank you for the time to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea.
Yes, and Andrea, we are going to work with you starting beginning of next year to start early to plan the access issues, to sort out the access issues. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Elke Pals, one of the organizers of the Dutch Youth IGF. And this year we organized a session on information and fake news. And that was really a great session. But with the proposal we had some difficulties because we really like to have youngsters on the panel. And yeah, on forehand, you don't know which youngsters do get funding to go to or are able to go to such an event as the IGF. So that's one of the difficulties I experienced. And also, I would like to call everyone to reach out to their local communities to get more youth involved in their local events, because we can all travel to the IGF and be able to participate here, but also at our local communities we have to involve them. And for instance, I organized the Youth IGF in Amsterdam in collaboration with my university, the University of Amsterdam, and we had around 100 youngsters talking about the issues we are also discussing here. But that was really a debate. Here we are listening and making some comments, but that was really a debate on how to move on. Because, yeah, that's what we want. We want a debate and not just some listening, because we can also listen or watch a video on YouTube. We don't have to travel here to do that. We need interaction. And that's one of the other points. Maybe we can just put these mics that we're having here in this room right now, just in every room, so that it would be more easily for people to participate and just stand up and interrupt a little. Because if we're going to wait for the end of the session, then we got a 5-minute period of time to ask questions, and I don't think that will, that will be good for the process. So I guess more interaction would be way better. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an excellent comment, and I think it's something we're all striving for and very much looking for, and clearly there's room for improvement still. We have an online participant. Anya, are they ready now?
Okay, thanks, Chair. My name is Tola. My name is Tola Shigota from Nigeria Private Sector. Okay, first we'd like to show appreciation to the IGF Secretariat for giving us the hub for Abuja, and that has enabled us to have participation from across the stakeholders that came in to appreciate more the IGF event. I would like to thank you once again for that. But we observed that during these sessions, once breakout sessions were arranged, we were not able to be part of the breakout session. And that affected us. Without knowing what is going on in the breakout session, all the discussions we had, we couldn't pass it across to the entire house. We would like in the future to have breakout sessions, to have online participants to be inclusive, as well as we passing across to the Secretariat what we discussed in the breakout session. Secondly, we would like as well to have more encouragement for private sector. We are from private sector anyway, and we would like to have more private sector participation on remote hub. Once again, I want to thank you for appreciating for giving us the hub for Abuja, and we would like to do more in the future. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's very interesting comments, particularly your last one. It would be good if the hubs were, in fact, fully multi-stakeholder as well. Something more we can strive for. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Omar Correa. I am a university professor and the vice president for the Cuban Informatic Union. First of all, I'm very happy to first stay here. So I want to share you the first, because our union is very young, but we have more than 8,000 members. And we are proud because the 32% are female and very young people, graduated for 22 universities in our country. We are working for the digital society in Cuba with all those interested. The last October, we had our civil society event to increase the chance on the development of ICT and how this can improve the society. It's interesting how we work in different topics. The most important idea for IGF, we work in inclusion, we work in cybersecurity, we're working in e-commerce, and it's very interesting for that, and thanks for IGF for helps, for different point of view, for work together and for these important ideas. In this international internet governance forum, we appreciate that we still have a lot to do. Cuba is increasing the level of access to the internet, to the extent that the available financial resources allow it. With 168 municipalities, more than 600 technology centers has been created, allowing the access to the internet and education in the use of the ICT. Cuba has internet access in all education, health, science and innovation systems, all with high incidence in the society. Nowadays, the access of the Cuban people is increasing with more than 500 public Wi-Fi zones. In this context, the Cuban Informatics Union, in collaboration with the government, work to increase the access to safe internet, contributing to the benefit of the society. Thank you very much for this event.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Hello, my name is Noha Ashraf, and I'm an ISO accused IGF fellow. And thanks for being open for feedbacks. It would be great to see more young people among panelists, not only in youth-related sessions, and allow them to be heard and not just give them the mic and say, yes, there was a youth participation in the session, while we're actually marginalized or kept at the end. We need to be heard, empowered, and allowed to contribute in policymaking. I would like to also recommend to provide more fellowships to young people to encourage stakeholders to select the best candidates and sponsor them to attend the regional and global IGFs, and even allocate a percentage from the attendees or delegates to be from young people. Thank you.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Bonjour, je vais parler en français.
Good afternoon. I'm going to be speaking French. My name is Florence Poziansky, and I'm from the Internet Sans Frontières NGO. I do speak English, but I want to speak French this afternoon because I want to emphasize cultural diversity and linguistic diversity, and I would also like to welcome the excellent interpretation that we have available. I would actually like to respond to the Telefonica representative. I think, unfortunately, that he has left. But I hope that the message will get to him, because I organized the workshop on the undersea cables. And I would like to say that we received invitations for a number of telecommunications companies. We issued invitations to these companies, but they did not reply. And the panel, I was the mediator, and I stressed the importance of representatives of telecommunications companies. But I think that, unfortunately, this representative didn't actually take the floor then. And I think But I think that what has been said demonstrates that despite the lack of a response that we had when it came to organizing our panel from industry, there is an interest on the part of telecommunications companies. There is interest in discussing this question of undersea cables and the governance of undersea cables, because the absence of transparency when it comes to tariff agreements on tariffs which deal with these cables, and also the way in which technical companies are involved and civil society is involved, it's very important for their voices to be heard. So via this, I would like to address a message to the representative of Telefonica and all other telecommunications companies. I would like to suggest that we continue such an exchange and that we take advantage of the IGF as an important forum in order to work together to improve infrastructure and to ensure universal access. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. And that's actually a good reminder to those of us in the audience, in fact, that we do have interpretation in all 6 UN languages, so you should feel free to make your comments in any of those languages. Marilyn, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Marilyn Cade. I'm the CEO of a small micro-enterprise, MCADE LLC, and I have a separate business unit called ICT Strategies, where I do social enterprise and development work. Only with the small enterprises and associations from developing countries for that particular business unit. I'm taking the floor to talk about something that I hope all of you will be very excited to recall, and that is when we established the IGF, we did so based on paragraph 72 and the entirety of the Tunis Agenda, which I know is like speaking Greek to many of you who are new, but I am going to reference two paragraphs, not just paragraph 72 in its entirety, but also paragraph 80, which makes reference to local and regional activities. When we met in Brazil in the fall, 2015, there were less than 60 national and regional IGFs. Working among ourselves, we took the challenge to try to double that number. And I am extremely pleased to say that today, a lot of changes have happened. More support at the Secretariat from our focal point, Anya Genko, who is here, managing remote participation. And today, we're just over the 100 mark. We have further to go, but if you have not picked up the great publication that was at the shared booth, I have about 50 copies and would love for you to stop and get one, where you can see whether or not your country, if you're not already directly involved, whether your country has an NRI. In order to change public policy, and I spent 27 years working in a global communications company and 10 years working for a state government in the United States, in order to change public policy, you must talk globally and you must act locally. And that is where the national and regional IGFs come in. We are organic, we are consensus-based, we are bottom-up, and we reflect what is going on in our country. We're not perfect because we can't always attract all stakeholders. So we need help and we need to work together. But at this particular session, the NRIs held 8 NRI to NRI interactive sessions, and we held a main session. We also had a shared booth in the village. The one sad thing for us was that although we were a main session, the MAG gave us only 2.5 hours, and they split our session with a 2-hour break in between. That is an incredible barrier for NRIs who are not only all volunteers and coming here to the IGF, but they carry the responsibility of representing their community at home. And I hope the MAG will be more sensitive to the NRIs in the allocation of the main session for next year. I'm going to make a comment about the 2 NRI sessions that I participated in and helped to monitor. One on fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. And I took a small poll at the end of the discussion about whether we predicted that we would continue to address this issue in our next NRI. We can't tell you until we do our bottom-up consensus, but the prediction was we would continue to address this issue. I also wanted to report that I moderated a government's open forum at their invitation. A private sector person was invited by a government to be the moderator of a government open forum. I want us to really think about how far we've come. And finally, at the end of the Access NRI session, the agreement among the group that participated was to work very directly together to try to take up tangible actions that they would each try to implement and trial in their NRI, and then we would hope to come back together and report to each other on our progress. I think that is tangible progress.
Thank you, Marilyn. And of course, we thank you and, of course, Anya Gengo for all the support to the NRIs and being such a continuous champion of them as well. So you have the floor.
Hello, Namaste. My name is Diksha Raut. I am from Nepal. I am ISOC Youth IGF Fellow. I come from a very developing country, or do I say a least developed country in the world, Nepal. And the awareness about Internet Governance Forum in my country is very low. And thus, only a very limited community know about IGM forums, especially the technical community. And thus, the participation from my country on IGF is only limited to those community only. So I'd like to request that the awareness of this forum has to be more wider, so that a lot of people like me who comes from the sector of law can also participate, and also to ensure that the IGF is more participatory, not only of the people who have access to internet, but also who do not have. And since I'm also a youth IGF fellow and talking on behalf of my community, I could not agree more with my colleague who just spoke. It is important that youth are also involved as a resource person, or do I say a panelist, in the forums, not only in the session which are dedicated to youth, but on other important issues like women or development or even the data protection, because we do have a lot to contribute. Thank you so much.
No, I think those are very important points, and I certainly hope that it's picked up more in the year to come. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for all the work you've put into organizing the Internet Governance Forum. I'm Jyoti Pandey. I work with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and I have 2 brief comments to make. It is important to think about accountability at the IGF. Management of the IGF is heavily dependent upon the Office of the United Nations Secretary General, which appoints the MAG in a top-down, opaque process. This has resulted in a MAG composition that is dominated by government and industry. Another way that the IGF is falling short is in its inability to provide a clear pathway for discussions that occur here to feed into the work stakeholders do elsewhere. For example, development of laws and regulation by governments, development of terms and services by corporates, and design of software, standards, and tech by coders and hackers. While the dynamic coalitions can and do provide recommendations, we need to also urge the IGF to fulfill its mandate and take on providing recommendations on critical issues. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can address your first point, and if anybody from Andessa wants to jump in there, obviously very welcome to. In fact, the appointment process is a little more nuanced than was just. The governments, so the MAG is 55 people, roughly half from governments. They are elected through a standard UN regional process. The other 3 stakeholder groups share the other half of the 55 slots, equal representation across the technical and academic sector, the private sector, and civil society. Each one of those 3 stakeholder groups run their own process to make recommendations that in fact are sent to the Secretary General. The Secretary General, I think, I've been told, relies very heavily on those recommendations. What they try to do in the Office of the Secretary General is just ensure that there's appropriate diversity, regional and gender primarily. Some steps were taken this year to make the requirements clear, more clear in terms of the positions that were being vacated. A third of the MAG turns over every year, so that those stakeholder groups had a little more guidance as they were actually sending their recommendations up to the Secretary General's office. So there are clearly still improvements we can all make in those processes, but it really is not top-down in the sense that the Secretary General, I know, relies very, very heavily on those bottom-up recommendations from the other stakeholder processes. And certainly with respect to your last point about more concrete outputs and recommendations, there is a drafting team that was, in fact, just established under a working group that I, in my role as MAG chair, is chairing, called the Working Group on a Multi-Year Strategic Work Program. And that is specifically to look at what are some of the possible ways we can do that. And in fact, your colleague is the person who's leading the drafting team, so I appreciate the effort and the comment. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. I am Rupinder Singh Parhar from India, Internet Service Providers Association of India, as well as the Governing Board of APNIC. I have some personal comments to offer on the IGF which I have just attended on the various sessions. The first point was about the number of sessions. This has already been covered by the other speakers. I won't waste time on that. However, one limited point I wish to make here is, after IGF, we must carry back something very constructive and substantial. Now, what I felt after attending some sessions where the civil society people were there, they are really concerned, rightly so, about the various issues the general public faces, especially from their respective governments, which they were voicing very loudly. Now, when speaking to some of them, I found that the country's laws which are governing them are not comprehensive. So my suggestion would be, if we can, at the IGF level, form a working group, draft some standard laws, keeping the best democratic institutions in mind, and those laws should be only on two subjects, that is freedom of speech and right to information. And if these laws are circulated, drafted, made, approved and circulated, one, it will give a document in the hands of the civil society to approach their governments and push them to moving towards world standard laws. And second, when they are sent to the respective governments, I am sure something good will also come out of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one quick follow-up question. Are you really meaning laws, or are you meaning norms or principles or some?
I am meaning laws. See, what happens is principles will decide laws. So once the democratic principles, the best of democratic principles have been taken into consideration and laws made on those, they would generally get acceptable across the world. And if they are not getting acceptable, the civil society will have a document to show to the governments as to why don't they want to meet the world standards in these two subjects. At least something substantial will come, some substantial discussion will take place, because remember, in the end, it is, if a law is comprehensively drafted, anyone who then faces illegal arrest or confinement or whatever, the courts will help him, because the law is comprehensive and well drafted.
Thank you. Sebastian, you have the floor.
Sébastien Bachelet. D'abord, je suis content.
Sébastien Bachelet. Well, I'm glad not to be the first person not to be speaking English here this afternoon. So my name is Sébastien Bachelet. I can see that you haven't quite captioned that name yet. B-A-C-H-O-L-E-T. Thank you. Well, I would like to start by congratulating all the organisers of this IGF. I don't come to all the IGFs, but I have been to some. And this one was not so far away, so I could get here by car. And I didn't have any support from anybody. I am an individual user. And I would like to thank the organisers, and I would like to focus on matters which I thought didn't work so well. It's not to say that everything else has been bad, but what I'm saying, these are the things which I think we should be concentrating on. Now, there was a session on the Internet of Objects. The organisers were not there. And I came up to the tribune and organised a debate there. And I hope that somebody will take the result of that discussion, because it's not my work, really. But if you want me to do it, of course, you'll have to ask me to. That's the first point. So a couple of examples now from this morning. The session was supposed to be organised, but nobody came. There was absolutely nobody in the room. And the second session I went to at the same time, there was a government there, one government. At least one government was represented to tell us about what was going on in that country. That was it. Not very many people there. It was a 5-minute meeting as a result. And there was nobody present, apart from me and one other person. So there weren't any questions, and we just left it at that. Now, I know it's difficult to find the attractive subjects and so on, but I do think that we've got to make sure that we have a multiplayer event and that this takes into account the greater part of people coming here and make sure that we don't have this sort of situation where nobody turns up to meetings. So once again, thank you very much. And the last thing I'd like to say is that we talked about gender or genre in every meeting I went to, and this is why I've been wearing a pink shirt. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Sébastien. And certainly take those points into consideration and look through the workshops. And I think it's also fair to say that attendance, I think specifically here on the last day, is probably not held by the proximity to year-end and upcoming holidays. But we'll certainly look more deeply into that and see if there's something else we can do to adjust that. So, sir, you have the floor.
Hello, my name is Alp Toker, A-L-P-T-O-K-E-R. I'm Executive Director of a civil society global initiative called NetBlocks, which aims to track internet shutdowns worldwide. So we're a technology-driven civil society group, and I just wanted to give an insight into why perhaps technologists have been dropping out of IGF over the last few years. So I asked some of my friends why they no longer attend, and this has been since 2014, because we had Istanbul IGF, that's where we're based. And I got some really interesting comments. Just before I do that, I just want to back up that remark from Emilia about the copyright and having more voices on that. And I especially want to back up the previous comment about accessibility, because accessibility is for all of us. It's not just a minority, it's something we all need. So the feedback I got from the technologists was really interesting, and I don't think it's been represented so far. The theme very much is that technologists feel their voices are ancillary when they're here. People tell them to do things. Policy people tell them to do things. Other civil society groups tell them to implement things. They're seen as coders, as people who provide services. But in the real world, technologists are actually building these systems. They're creating their own groups, and they run a lot of this work in their own space. So to get the technologists back, we need to invite them as equals and not just as people who will implement the ideas of others, because that's making people run away at a massive pace. And they're not just private sector, there are some independent. I think it's still hard for independents to participate in IGF compared to other stakeholders. So that's perhaps an insight into how we can bring more technologists back into IGF.
That was very helpful. Thank you. Just a quick notice that I'm going to close the queue in just a few minutes so that we have time for all the speakers that are in queue, and then some reflections from the host country co-chair here. And then, of course, at 5 o'clock, we would go into the closing ceremony. So let me go to the queue over here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Veridiana Alimonte. I'm from Intervozes, which is a Brazilian civil society organization. We and other Latin American and Caribbean organizations gathered here in IGF, and we wrote an open letter regarding fake news and elections, and we would like to read it for you in order to use well the time and show the diversity of the organizations. We're going to split the reading. We are already positioned here, and we won't read the undersigned organizations, but you can read it and also endorse the letter, even if your organization is not a Latin American one, in the website direitosnarede.org.br. Who could not write down the website, we will tweet it with the hashtag fake news and IGF 2017. So I'll start the reading. Open letter from Latin American and Caribbean civil society representatives on the concerns around the discourse about fake news and elections. In the context of the Internet Governance Forum 2017 and growing international debates about the so-called fake news, the undersigned organizations would like to express strong concerns about possible paths that the framing of the issue is taking. The terminology has been widely spread in rhetorics from the global north, but we cannot import such a concept without taking into account the long history of media concentration and manipulation in Latin American and Caribbean region. Legitimizing the term as a novelty is misrepresenting the nature of the problem, as asserted by Frank LaRue during the Internet Governance Forum in Geneva. Quoting him, "I don't like the term fake news because I think there is a bit of a trap in it. We are confronting campaigns of misinformation, so we should talk about information and disinformation. They are trying to dissuade us from reading news and thinking. Campaigns of misinformation have been a strategy from traditional media monopolies to threaten and dismantle democracies for years. We cannot just consider years of work and debate from the movement for democratization of communications and adopt the fake news terminology as a completely new phenomenon in Latin America. Just consider old and new power imbalances concerning media ownership concentration, social media monopolies, and nation-states' political interests to control and manipulate speech within and beyond its borders, open space for serious consequences."
My name is Martin Borgioli from Hiperderecho, from Peru. Following what Veridiana said, we are concerned that the adoption of such a terminology will eventually lead to empower traditional media monopolies against independent media, community media, and independent critical voices, as if they were solely the one entitled as possible official fact-checkers, a trend that might escalate in the same way as the persecution against community radio proliferated across Latin America. It will lead also to open space for surveillance, content manipulation, and censorship from platforms. We have already seen social media platforms positioning themselves and testing tools to classify and block what is fake or real or trustworthy. Any provision on intermediary liability should never entail the need for this sort of activity. Furthermore, fact-checking partnerships might not be transparent or take into account that we operate in a context in which platforms have substantial power to manipulate their untransparent algorithms to prioritize a particular kind of content. That would also be equally misleading, even more damaging and obscure, as if would not be subject to any oversight. This trend becomes even more worrisome in the context of regional elections. It will also lead to encourage surveillance and censorship from governments. We have already seen troublesome initiatives and a proliferation of laws aiming to activate monitoring and regulating of online speech and delegating fact-checking to authorities, therefore weakening the role of independent media watchdogs. For instance, Brazil has just set up a governmental council composed, among others, by representatives from the army and the intelligence agency to monitor fake news during the elections and have draft bills with the intent to define fake news as false and incomplete content. In face of this scenario, we profoundly agree with another concern also expressed by Frank LaRue that said, the problem again is that fake news becomes a perfect excuse to just silence or shut down any alternative or any dissident voice.
Good afternoon. Now, if I could just, I'm sorry, I mean, this session really is taking stock for the activity that we've all been engaged in here over the last year. So if there's more of the statement, I would encourage you to keep it short so that we can get back to the specifics of how we actually improve and advance the IGF tier.
It's really the end of the statement. I'm Maria Paz Canales from Derechos Digitales. Therefore, reinforcing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and inspired partly by the Joint Declaration of Freedom of Expression on Fake News, Disinformation, and Propaganda, we would like to reinforce the following principles to guide future conversation about dissemination of misinformation in the digital environment. And I think this is the contribution that we can do, actually, with recommendation in a place like this, IGF. The human right to impart information protects ideas that may shock or disturb, and it's even not limited to correct statement, though it does not justify the dissemination of knowingly or recklessly false statement by official or state actor or by organized and powerful private actors. States may only impose restriction on the right to freedom of expression in accordance with the test of such restriction under international law. We know the principles, I'm not going to repeat. General prohibition on the dissemination of information based on vague and ambiguous ideas, including fake news or non-objective information, are incompatible with international standards for restriction on freedom of expression. It is necessary to consider various forms of disinformation in this debate, ranging from news without any factual basis created intentionally to deceive for political or economic reasons to decontextualized or unbalanced information. The identification of falsehood in the first case differs from the other. States and intermediaries should refrain from taking measures to limit access to or dissemination of digital content, including through automatic process, such algorithmic or digital recognition-based content removal systems, which are not transparent in nature, which fail to respect minimum due process standards, and or which unduly restrict access to the dissemination of content. States and intermediaries should engage in efforts to ensure clear and complete information about played political advertisement over the internet and to promote algorithmic transparency. All the stakeholders should promote a media and digital literacy, as well as free, independent, and diverse communication environment, including media diversity, which is a key means of addressing disinformation and propaganda. In democratic societies, it is the confrontation of ideas and the existence of open and plural debate that can combat misinformation. All the stakeholders should consider other measures to promote equality, non-discrimination, intercultural understanding, and other democratic values, including with a view addressing the negative effects of disinformation and propaganda. Thank you.
Thank you. Without saying anything about the comment of the statement, I want to reiterate that this forum is the one opportunity this community has to give feedback specifically on the IGF program and taking stock. It's really not appropriate, and in fact it takes away from the time of everybody else in this room to improve a forum that they came here to participate in if we have lengthy political statements. So I really would like to ask everybody to refrain from that and please stay with the theme here of the taking stock session. So Nigel, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I will certainly not talk about fake news. My name is Nigel Hickson. I work for ICANN. In Mexico and in Brazil, I took this microphone. I don't often get the opportunity, so it's nice to get the opportunity. And I urged the young people, I urged the younger generation to have passion, to stand up to their beliefs, but to do more, to go outside this fora. Not just to speak inside here, but to go and lobby their governments, to go and lobby their businesses, to get their views across. And I think they have been doing this. I agree with you, Madam Chair, this is not the place to talk about fake news. We've had the opportunity in the IGF. But please, those that feel passionately about these issues, go to their governments. But I'm going to say something else as well this afternoon. A politician in the UK, famously in 1953, went to the podium and he said, "I'm going to fight, fight, fight for the party I love." He was a Labour politician when the party was in crisis. Well, I'm going to say, fight, fight, fight for the IGF you love. Because, Madam Chair and ladies and gentlemen, I think we're at a pivotal point. The IGF is the only true multi-stakeholder global venue where we all are able to put forward our points, and we must protect it. We must nurture it. As Marilyn Cade said, and I don't always agree with Marilyn Cade, It's been a fantastic journey. We've grown the national regional initiatives. There's lots and lots of dynamic processes going on, and we must protect this. But we must also support the IGF, not just with rhetoric, not just with words, but with practical support. We call on the UN to support it, as it does, but even more so, sir. We call on governments to support it, with checkbooks, with support, with workshop proposals. We call on governments to support it in the same way. We must all support it. We must all be involved in this project so we can grow and stimulate this debate for another 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Very rousing words and a great deal of energy for this late in the week and the day. I'm going to close the queue now, as I announced a few moments ago that I would be, so that we can get through the rest of the speakers here, leave time for the honorary host country co-chair to make some final remarks, and then, again, move to the closing ceremony. So we'll go to the queue here in the middle.
Good afternoon. My name is Luan Cruz. I'm from Brazil. I'm part of the program Youth at IGF promoted by the CGI. And I would like to talk about the participation of young people during the sessions. And during this week, we held daily meetings about our participation and shared our experience. And every day, there were reports of unanswered and ignored questions, not to mention the lack of time for debate. And I would like to stress that we are not here just for decoration, and we really want to debate. And my suggestions for you, are to start to accepting more different styles of workshops, such as breakout groups and birds of a feather, and to approve workshops that provide a larger portion of time for discussion. And if that's not respected, proponents should be penalized for upcoming events.
Thank you. That's very good feedback. We have been trying to encourage a broader type of session. So the more support we can get from all of you, and particularly in the workshop proposals themselves, the easier that will come about. Zina, you have the floor.
My name is Zina Bouharb. I'm from Lebanon, from the government. I'm a MAG member, but my intervention now is related to the Arab IGF process, in which I'm involved since many years now. It's just a clarification that at the conclusion of the Arab IGF 2015, an initiative was launched by ESCWA and LAS. This initiative started by forming a technical cooperation working group from various stakeholders from 13 different Arab countries. This group worked on the enhancement of the Arab process in 5 areas: the objectives, the structure, financing, content and output, media and outreach. In parallel, a public survey was launched to gather comments from the Arab RG community. This group's efforts, in addition to the public consultation, resulted in producing a new charter and an updated Arab roadmap for Internet governance. And as of 2018, the new phase of the Arab IGF will be fully revived. Several expressions of interest were received from different countries to host the 5th Arab IGF Forum in the second half of 2018. I thought it's needed to clarify this issue because it was mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Zaina. You have the floor.
Bonjour à tous, Motenabino. Good afternoon, my name is Felix. I represent IGF from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I would like to congratulate you for the diversity of the participants that we have met here. Nevertheless, I would like to focus on the representation of Africa in the various panels. I've noticed that there has been improvement compared to previous years, but there are still efforts that need to be made to ensure that Africa is properly representative on panels. The second issue concerning representation regards Central Africa. we've raised this before, and what we can say is that Central Africa is sorely underrepresented or even absent. Furthermore, it's the DRC which is the giant there, with a very large population, countries with 9 borders of other countries, but it's been completely absent from the Africa IGF. I think that countries like ours should be given an equal footing to express themselves. Thank you.
No, thank you. In fact, when the IGF was renewed for 10 years in 2015, that was specifically one of the suggestions or comments in the resolution, was that we work harder to engage more developing country participation. And it is something we have been trying to do, but we very clearly still have a very, very long way to go. And again, suggestions, comments, always welcome. Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you. Maarten Botteman, ICANN board and chairman of the Dynamic Coalition on Internet of Things. I really want to thank the MEC and the Secretariat again for the excellent preparation and the host for their hospitality and welcome. And without them, we wouldn't have been able to do our work. So my conclusion is, over the years, a lot of progress has been made as well. I very much agree with that in the IGF, and thanks to the IGF. The agenda represents what's really, at the moment, on the public mind regarding internet governance. And the growing understanding, more here than anywhere else, I think, that no stakeholders can do this alone, tackle these issues. I think this is the place to go for all activities to come together that take place in the world, knowing this is not the only activity, but this is the best platform to bring it together, I believe. So with that, there's also a challenge of many sessions in very little time. And maybe there's an opportunity for improvement there, to improve cross-learning, and in particular for those that relate to each other. For instance, to have, for those that relate to each other, organize a pre-meeting, probably online, to make it possible. Announce times beforehand, open participation, but implicit invitation to the organizers. That will allow them to align their message and their discussions where possible. And maybe a second thing, and I know I call upon more volunteer action probably, is to have rapporteurs for related meetings to extract the common themes.
Thank you, Martin. We're going to go to the queue on the end. The queue is closed with those people that are standing up at the moment. And in the end, Anya will go. I think you have a couple of comments from the online participants. So you have the floor.
Okay, merci. Bonjour.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I come from Côte d'Ivoire. As far as I'm concerned, the major challenge is security on the internet. When we talk about access to the internet, we must talk about security and ensure that users trust the internet. In my country, we are vulnerable to cybercrime. We've had several attacks. We would like to take this opportunity to say that the IGF should encourage stakeholders to take part in various issues relating to cybersecurity at the next forum. We're young. We want to take advantage of internet opportunities, but do so safely. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Mary, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Mary Uduma, and I'm from Nigeria. I first want to say I want to congratulate the MAG of 2017 IGF. You've done a lot of work. You encouraged people to participate. When we had our African Open Forum, the number of Africans that attended was very, very impressive. and we can see improvement in the attendance. But the improvement in effective participation is what we are still looking towards. And we know by the time somebody has said something about capacity building, probably that would also help. There were too many workshops, and too many of them related, and too many of them almost saying the same thing. So one, especially those we brought for the first time, they were a bit confused. They don't know which one to attend and which one to go. Probably we'll look at, when you are looking at the workshops, you see the ones that are too related, then you have to do some more work to see that what Sebastian expected, what experience will not happen again. I want also to mention some names. I want to mention you, Lynn, the chair, Shangatai, Marilyn, and Anya. You people have done so well for us in the NRI network, and we're able to have collaborative sessions that brought about exchange of views, exchange of perspectives, exchange of new things that are happening in other countries. But we want to see, just like Marilyn said, that we should be given a session where high-level people will come, hear what we are doing, and also know that these things are happening at the national level. Finally, I want to say that all workshops, conclusions that will benefit the countries will be anything that is linked to the SDGs. So our workshops should also be linked to the SDGs, and I know that the UN is also interested in having this. Finally, the timing of the IGF. Please, we are supposed to be with our loved ones because this is a holiday period. If it is possible not to schedule the IGF around the holiday period, that would be very, very good for us. Thank you very much.
I think your last comment in particular would be well supported by everybody who has actually stayed here for the day. Thank you, Mary. You have the floor.
Thank you. Norbert Bolo, JustNet Coalition Civil Society. I wanted to react briefly to the remarks you made about that statement from Latin America. I generally agree that this is not the place for lengthy statements, but I would say that this particular statement is definitely one that should be highly respected, highly welcomed, and highly taken serious. I'm not from Latin America, I was not involved, but I'm well enough connected to international civil society to know that this is really something that has come up in reaction to what has been going on in many sessions here at the IGF, where my colleagues from Latin America were justifiably alarmed about something that is really not acceptable from their perspective and their situation. It has been mentioned that we need to be inclusive of developing countries, so we really need to take them serious. And when their concerns and their situation is being trampled underfoot by a discourse which is too much northern-based, we need to take it seriously when they speak up. So my heartfelt thanks to my Latin American colleagues for having done so. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, it was not any comment at all on the statement, just the appropriateness of the venue here. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'm Daria Medic, the curator of the exhibition Art at IGF, which is up for a few more hours in Building E next to the cafeteria if you have time. I would first like to thank the IGF Secretariat and the wonderful people from the UN on all the support for allowing us to do this, to deliver this experiment on bridging digital art and digital policy, and showing all of these issues that we deal with technology in an interactive way in our everyday lives. We had really interesting feedback from people. We would love to hear suggestions for continuing this. And we would really love to see things like this happening in future IGFs, broadening the discussion to bring in interactive perspectives, to bring in more feedback from the audience, to bring in artists even in the discussions. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. It was very, very interesting. Sir, you have the floor, and then Anya will go to you for the online participants.
Thank you, Madame. Je suis Obed Tenzi.
I'm Obed Tenzi from IGF ILO. I have to say that we have to think about the chasm between developed and developing countries. There's Wi-Fi in the buses in Geneva, but in Haiti, electricity isn't supplied to all. It's something of a luxury. We have a generation talking about technology in summits, but the majority of people don't understand this at all. Cybersecurity, smart city, artificial intelligence are the words of experts, but they're not useful for Haitians. So I think this community needs committed youth for the cause of the internet. We have to try to make sure that young people can help their communities and ensure the future of the internet. I think that the ideas coming out of this forum should commit all professionals to serving their country in their area of expertise. That's what I think. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Anya?
There are 3 comments. Can I read all 3? Or? Thank you. First comment from University of Port Harcourt of Nigeria. I have a concern regarding the discussions and workshops which took place here during the IGF. Is it possible that such discussions can actually give rise to sanctions from the UN if certain processes are broken? For instance, the issue of internet shutdowns, which was one of the breakout sessions. Does the IGF have the enabling power to recommend a sanction to these countries, or we are just talking for talking's sake? Another comment from Bernes Kibet. The outcome of the IGF should be analyzed. Once all the discussions at the different workshops have been done, actions should be taken based on the outcomes and later analyzed to see how transformative they have been, as well as to look into the outcomes that have not been expected. And the third comment is from Usuarios Digitales. It is necessary to address with local IGF the issue of increasing remote participation. We have seen that the participation in the meetings where we have participated, we would like to have statistics of these participations to know in a certain way the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. I'm going to turn to Thomas in just a moment, but just a brief response to the first question, which I think was really the only question there. I mean, the IGF, of course, is not the venue to actually recommend sanctions. I think we can be very clear on what good practice looks like and, you know, some of the ramifications of different policy choices. But what the IGF is really good at is driving action out to the appropriate bodies or places where it can clearly be picked up and then applied through appropriate practices or other bodies with the appropriate expertise and means. Thomas is the honorary host country chair for Switzerland. He has a couple of reflections on this particular session, and then we will move to the closing ceremony.
Thank you, Lynn. And I've listened very closely to the feedback, because this is of fundamental importance, because we all need to remember that the IGF has been started as an experiment. It still is an experiment that is evolving, and only through constructive feedback. People can learn, and the format and the process and everything can continue to develop. And we also need to first of all, I need to say, as a person who has been participating in the 12 IGFs, which is a fortune, and has had the chance to be part of the organizing team this time, there's some reflections that I would like to share with you as a complement to what we've already heard. First of all, I think it should not be forgotten that it was a courageous decision of those who actually set the IGF up at that time, to set it up as an open-ended, bottom-up, equal basis multi-stakeholder discussion forum, because that's not like this carved in stone in the WSIS outcomes. So it was really the team around Nitin and Marcus at that time that took a very wise decision to set it up like this. And there needs to be reflections on how to improve, on how to further make the IGF more relevant. We tried as the host this year to make it as attractive as possible, make it as political as possible, to not focus only on technical issues, but actually really underline the relevance for all our daily lives, all aspects. We have tried to also experiment a little bit, very cautiously, but nevertheless try to introduce some new elements in the way things are done wherever we could, together in coordination with the MAG. As it has been said, we've, for the first time, not had an opening ceremony with a series of 20, 30 monologue speeches of high-level participants. We have had a president who agreed to have an interactive dialogue with high-level representatives, even with an open mic. And we are quite happy to see how this has worked, and we also would encourage others to go for interactive formats, not just on expert level, but actually also on high level. We have proposed to you now these messages that are complementing the chairman's summary in order to contribute to having a more tangible outcome, which is not a negotiated outcome. It's just a different format of reflecting the key elements, or some key elements of the discussion, in a way that people may use them more easily. And of course, we have tested this for 10 years in Eurodic and in a number of national initiatives. So we hope that this is also contributing to making the IGF more visible, more easily usable, leaving more traces in decision-making fora. And of course, we are also interested in having your feedback and improving this. So the message, and this is the message also to the MAG, to the next map, don't just go for the least common denominator of what you all agree. Try to have a little courage. Try to cautiously but consciously test out new formats, new things, see how things go, explain what your intention is with this, because this is what drives the process further. We've also tried to use the potential that we have in Geneva here to open up. Many people say the IGF is always the traveling circus of the same people. We've tried to open this up to other people here in Geneva, experts from all over the world, to engage with people that normally are not considered to be in the core of the IGF or IG community. So also their outreach in various forms is something that you should keep to experiment. And there's still room for improvement. One thing that I'm still wondering why this is still happening is the size of panels. If you have sessions with 12 people on a panel or more, the session lasts 90 minutes. This is not really involving it's not using the potential of the people in the room to have like a crowd intelligence discussion and outcome. And at the Swiss level, where we have a Swiss IGF, we just told them that the IGF, there are no panelists. We just have two provoking entry statements of 5 minutes, and then moderators who discuss with the whole audience. And this actually has been very well received by the participants, and it just creates more innovative new ideas, because you don't always have the same people speaking and the same people listening. And it also lowers the barrier for young and new people to start taking the floor. So there are things that are also there that with interactivity, IGF is more interactive than most other conferences, but there's still rooms for experimenting and trying to become even more interactive. And something that actually this time I realized that what part of the chicken and egg problem is that also Nigel has alluded to, and I would like to thank him for making that point. We all agreed that the IGF should be an open, bottom-up, multi-stakeholder process for dialogue without negotiating an outcome, without reducing the scope for dialogue, not producing negotiated results. And then we see that we have maybe not enough business representatives here. And then when you talk to business people, and this is the same in Eurodig and elsewhere, say, well, we have no resources to come here because there's no outcome that is produced. We have to go to Brussels or where decisions are made. So we don't have the resources to go just to talk and listen. And so there's somehow a mismanagement of expectations and communications. So if we think that we need this space for dialogue and do not want to have decisions, then we also need to give the resources for people to come and explain why this is important. It's the same with government. When we were trying to set the panels together, the high-level representatives, when we were inviting ministers, the first question of their advices is, how many ministers from my neighboring countries do you have? And then you try to explain them, well, we have like a panel of maximum 10 people. We have to be multi-stakeholder balanced. We have to be regional balancing. We have to be gender balancing. So we can't invite all your 5 neighbor countries and you, because that would make the panel like 100 people if you take the balance to the end. So also there, if we rank success of a conference in the numbers of ministers and presidents and CEOs that participate or at its outcome, then the IGF will never be a success, because this is not what it's about. So we have to really work together to communicate differently about what the IGF, what the value added of the IGF is, and also Marilyn and others have said this. It is a platform where decisions are not taken, but decisions are pre-shaped, where agendas are set. And this is the unique value. It's an open, the most open platform that we have, where this is the easiest for new ideas, new solutions to emerge in this very broad environment. And this is something that is not for free. Nigel is completely right. And what we experience is that governments from developing and developed countries spend millions and millions to organize, and businesses spend millions to sponsor non-inclusive, based on invitation, conferences on IG issues all over the world with millions of money, where they invite 100, 200, 500 people with ministers, with huge costs for security and other things. And then they don't have any money to give to the IGF Secretariat to fund it properly, to implement all the nice ideas for improvement that we keep having, but we just don't have the resources to actually implement them. And that doesn't really make sense to some extent, at least not in my view. So we really have to explain to our CEOs, to our ministers. Of course, some say, well, we don't need ministers, we don't need CEOs. It's actually, the quality is better if we have the experts talking. Fine. But then we need to tell our ministers and our CEOs, or those who allocate the resources, that they should give the resources so that these experts can go, and that they should give money to the IGF Secretariat, that they can properly fund youth participation, remote participation, participation of people with disabilities, and so on and so forth, because, as I said, this is not for free. And also that you find host countries that are willing and able to fund that part of the process. So we need to communicate differently, all of us, in our hierarchies, in our networks, about what is the unique value added of the IGF in order to get the resources and the attention that we are convinced, and I personally am convinced, the IGF deserves, because of its uniqueness and of its unique value. So we all need to continue to work on this in the thinking about how to further improve the IGF. Maybe we even need to change the name from Internet Governance Forum to something like Internet Governance Agenda Setting Forum or Decision Shaping Forum, that people realize that there is a value in this dialogue. I'll stop here, and I promise you I'll be very short in the closing ceremony. So thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And neither Changatai nor I actually sponsored that particular discussion, but we're certainly very, very grateful for it. There were many, many good points. So at this point in time, the taking stock session is closing, and we're moving to the final event of the IGF, and that is the closing ceremony. And Changatai will be the master of ceremonies for such session.
Thank you very much, Lynn. So as Lynn said, this is the final section of IGF 2017. Doesn't mean that it's the end. We do have intersessional activities that will still carry on. So we're going to have speakers from representatives from the various stakeholder groups to say a few words of reflection on the IGF. So our first speaker is Mr. Matthew Rantanen, Director of Technology for the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, that is SCTCA, and he is representing civil society. If he can come up to the lectern, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, colleagues, and stakeholders, friends, and to make sure I'm recognizing everyone and observing proper protocols, I would like to say all protocols observed. I'd like to thank you for the honor and allowing me to speak at the closing ceremonies of this Internet Governance Forum in Geneva. I'd also like to thank those that nominated me and selected me to participate. I'm here before you today to bring awareness to the global indigenous communities around the world. It is our goal to ensure that we, the indigenous people of the world, have a recognized seat at the table in planning, development, and implementation of the governance of the technology advances of this resource that we gather to support at this forum. I am Matthew Rantanen. I am descendant of the Cree Nation in northern Alberta, Canada. I am also Norwegian and Finnish, and I was born in the United States of America, of which I am a citizen. I work in the U.S. with 19 Native nations as their Director of Technology, and together we have built a large community network, but more importantly, an ISP. It is a sustainable business model that continues to grow and support the unserved and underserved Native American populations. It is a microwave network served by fiber that is more than 650 miles of links and supports 100 tribal government municipalities, libraries, schools, as well as nearly 500 tribal homes. We are continually expanding the network to allow access to all of our 3,000 homes on the reservations, and we also support the surrounding non-tribal communities. We understand to enhance a community is to be inclusive of those that surround you and have some of the same barriers to access. We had to build this network to connect our communities because those communication companies charged with deploying telecom services in the United States have failed to support the nation's most vulnerable population. Over the past 16 years of work on this initiative, it has become very apparent that there are barriers to entry for tribes and many other rural, unserved, and underserved communities to get the access that they deserve. This realization has transitioned my work for the past decade to include advocacy for Native American tribes at the federal and state government levels of policymaking. I often joke that I am a babysitter of meetings, and I am there to make sure of three things. Native American tribes are not forgotten, Native American tribes are not intentionally excluded, and Native American tribes are actually in the decision-making level of the process. I am proud to say that I am now also doing this for the global indigenous communities of the world at the IGF and ICANN. While I was chairman of the board of Native Public Media, we presented to ICANN the concept of the Tribal Ambassador Program, which I am very pleased to say that it was accepted and further expanded to become the Global Indigenous Ambassador Program. I attended ICANN 60 as an Indigenous mentor to the first two Indigenous ambassadors. Here at the Internet Governance Forum, I joined a group of community networking fellows brought here by the Internet Society, allowing us the opportunity to participate and realize the importance for Indigenous inclusion at this governance level. The internet will fail to be the resource that it should be if it does not include all of its people in the development of its future. Indigenous populations feel the governance of the internet should include the most underrepresented voices in the world's populations. These communities are typically unserved or extremely underserved populations that are getting left further and further behind. With less than 50% of the world's population connected to the internet, that number is far more extreme in the indigenous communities of the world. With the development of more and more video solutions and real-time video communications on the internet, with gigabit applications in the near future, we are in a constant struggle to continue to support our communities without being recognized in the development process. Having worked on the first and second Native Nations Broadband Task Force at the Federal Communications Commission in the United States, spanning 6 years of service, I have a very strong foundation of understanding on how to implement change in rulemakings and procedures to break down the barriers to communications for these vulnerable communities. I have worked with the National Congress of American Indians in the United States for nearly 10 years, and I co-chair their Tech and Telecom Subcommittee, which develops resolutions supported by its 360 member tribes. These resolutions are used to work with the federal government to help them understand the needs of the people to further support the indigenous communities that are being excluded from the process. I am standing before you today to remind you that the indigenous populations are part of the next 3.5 billion internet users that are not being included in the process that is deciding their fate. We are willing and able to contribute, and we know our needs. Policymakers have the responsibility to remove barriers to indigenous community networking, not imposing their preconceived notions on what they feel those communities need without proper consultation and inclusion of the indigenous people in the decision-making process. Policy and governance working hand in hand with indigenous communities to understand the actual needs is the path to solving this problem. And a last-minute announcement, we are very happy to announce the creation of the Internet Society, ISOC's Community Networks Special Interest Group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rantanen. Our next speaker is a youth speaker, Ms. Gian Soriano, a Net Mission ambassador and one of the organizers of the Asia Pacific IGF. And she is also currently studying international journalism at the Hong Kong Baptist University.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Gian Soriano from Net Mission in Hong Kong and also the organizer of the Youth Internet Governance Forum Asia Pacific, the youngest member of the Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum Multi-Stakeholder Steering Group, and also a journalism student. It is a great honor for me to speak to you today on behalf of young people. I would like to thank the local host for organizing the IGF and making us have a successful and fruitful forum. To all the workshop organizers and speakers who have traveled miles to be here and speak on different issues and topics that are close to us, and mostly to young people here who bravely participate on a grand-scale event that can be intimidating to newcomers. Our new ideas, shared realities, and active engagement definitely adds a new layer to the entire event and eventually to IGF's growth. I started my IGF journey 4 years ago when I was still in high school. Now I'm about to finish my undergraduate. I went from a newcomer to a local organizer, a regional organizer, to now empowering others. Over the years, I also witnessed the growth of the youth community in the IGF. During my first time in 2013, I could count the number of young people with my 2 hands. Today, you need a whole room to fit us all. From one youth-oriented workshop before to numerous youth panels today, indeed, youth is no longer in the shadows. The IGF youth community is diverse, coming from different regions, backgrounds, and interests, but essentially passionate, driven, and more importantly, having the willingness to learn. These things make young people an integral part of the IGF, not only because we are digital natives or the largest end users, but also because we are its future leaders. Being young is not a disadvantage, it is a strength. And we know the needs of the internet community, and we also have the power to address them. Over the course of the past days, I hear discussions on the challenges of youth. We're past the problems of youth involvement because of various organizations and groups that continue to support young people to be here, that start initiatives and give us a platform to engage in. Right now, what we're facing are participation exhaustion and the lack of continued motivation, and essentially how to have continuity. We're here now, but how do we continue the momentum? Because essentially, we want our efforts and what we do, we want to see them have results and create an impact. And standing here today, giving this speech is one of them. And it all started with the majority of how young people here started by participating. And it's not only about our voices being heard, but also how we use our voice and how it's worth. Which brings us back to the importance of continuity. In order for your voice to be heard, you have to make noise. But you also have to question how effective is it if you only do it once. Continuity allows for better collaboration, better capacity building, and eventually better role models through mentorships and toolkits that youth can bring back what they have seen and experienced to their local communities. It snowballs and eventually it forms into something. As a youth fellow last year, I also met a fellow youth from Africa who wanted to start her own initiative, but she shared her difficulties in looking for people to support her. It is through her experiences here in the IGF and our shared conversations about what NetMission has done in Asia-Pacific region and our motto of for youth by youth that inspired her to do something for her own community. Similarly, I met youths here this year who want to start their own movements and see the IGF as a great stepping stone. Initiative from youth is important, but support from different stakeholders is just as valuable because the discussions are essentially from all parties. And as a global community, I believe we should help youth initiatives take root and ensure capacity building and have various support measures. So if you support youth, you are also helping to shape the future of the internet. Perhaps I may not be the best representation of us all, but I can definitely say that the reason I am here today speaking to you is because I was supported and I was able to still be here today. So as a young person, I encourage all youth here that if you see something you want to change and no one is doing anything about it, you can be the one to start something. There are a lot of things that have been done and are currently being done. So to leave you all with, I would like to ask how we want to continue from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sosoriano. Our next speaker is from the private sector, Mr. Bobby Sundeep Singh Bedi. Thank you. From the International Federation of Film Producers Association.
Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and a pleasure to be with you today at the IGF closing ceremony. I'm a content creator, and the content I create is consumed in my country, India, and in the rest of the world. This is my third Internet Governance Forum, and by several measures, it has been the best. Of the various goals that the IGF has, one of the key ones is to make sure that the Internet remains truly global and freely accessible. A space where we all have the same rights as we have offline. We all need to ensure that the online opportunities are eventually available to all. We need to do so by reducing the digital divide and ensuring equal access to everyone on this planet. Today, nearly 25 years after the Internet came into being, half of the world's population is still offline. And half of that number is from India and China, despite their energetic progress in the last few years. This has to change. We need a serious effort from all stakeholders present in this room, governmental organizations, civil society, academia, and the private sector, which I represent, to ensure that all people, be they in Africa, Asia, or any other continent, are truly connected and the benefit from all that is good on the internet and be protected from all which is not. Having reviewed several of the workshops and main sessions over the last 3.5 days, I see that the combined wisdom of the internet governance community seems to suggest that 80 to 90% of the outcome of what seems to be this revolutionary technology is for the good of mankind. Between 10 to 15% presents threats and concerns which need to be dealt with and have been discussed across the last few days. The one challenge, however, that is different from 20 years ago is that we are no longer dealing with telecom or local content that was, for the most part, confined to national boundaries, at least till the 90s. Internet is global, its benefits are global, and the concerns it presents are global. To keep it that way, we need to ensure an ongoing dialogue between the various stakeholders who have an important role to play. This does not mean that individual stakeholders cannot meet to hold discussions without the presence of everyone else. But for the most part, multi-stakeholder engagement propelled by conferences such as IGF will enhance the benefits and reduce the concerns. From the business community's point of view, I would like to underline an often ignored belief. My belief is that the world, including the cyber world, strives to be a happy place, and that people engage with cyberspace to be entertained and happy. Users log on to consume paid and free high-quality content that people like me produce, and to consume user-generated content that their peers and friends create. Creators of this content, local and universal, are as important in this value chain as the other parts, and their financial health and creative freedom are as crucial. Apart from consuming created content, users of the internet log on to meet friends, family, and colleagues just to share moments of joy and concern and to be informed of the change, good and bad, happening in the world. This demand is what creates the first consumer pull and drives the commerce, fueling investments in infrastructure, and this is what makes the mighty network an economically viable and effective tool for education, security, health, disaster management, and any emergent situation. I might add that the uncertainties in the socio-political world have the potential of slowing down investments. Investments in infrastructure, investments in content, and investments in ensuring that a truly global medium remains global. To reduce the uncertainties and to address the misunderstandings, we need to get together all stakeholders for frequent dialogue. This global community has a significant role to play in building capacity and confidence in matters relating to the internet. National governments must ensure an environment that fosters fresh investment and innovation in this space. We must also refrain from putting on national rules and regulations on critical issues such as privacy or data flows that have the ability to constrain the internet's truly interconnecting and global characters. The line between use and abuse is a fine one. I take this opportunity to entreat all stakeholders, government, civil society, academia, and the private sector to respect this line. The test of effective use of legislation is important. The test of its abuse is critical. The internet is a place to improve the quality of life. It should not be used to intimidate or otherwise impede the quality of life of our brothers and sisters wherever they might live. I'd like to thank the MAG the UNDESA, and in particular, Mr. Chengtai Masango and Ms. Lynn Sinomore for this outstanding IGF, which, like its predecessors, has certainly moved the needle on improving collaborations and understanding amongst the multitask holder group towards a better, open, and global internet. I close with a line from my favorite song by the late John Lennon. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. You may say I'm a dreamer, so come and share this dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bedi. Our next speaker is from the technical community, Raquel Gatto, Manager for Chapter Development in the Americas for the Internet Society.
Thank you, Shangatai. Ladies and gentlemen, IGF community. You must remember when President Lutard opened this IGF, what does she say to us, to all of us? Be courageous, right? You remember that? So I want to commend all of you, the brave souls that stays to the very end, including those remote participants that stayed with us through the night. You are all brave. You are probably having family and friends waiting for you at home. It's hard to be the last speaker at the last session, but I hope that I can give you some thoughts around it. I came a long way out from Brazil to be here with you. Here at the IGF, at the very first day also, I joined a discussion around bringing citizens to the internet governance debate. And among the things that we had to choose were questions that would boost these citizens to be in the debate. And one of them was, what does the internet do to change your life? And I was puzzled. I realized that the internet didn't change my life. It didn't change my life because it was there. It was there to use. So the real question that we should be doing now, we should be having now, is what would we do if the internet doesn't exist? And that's a reality. That's a reality for many of us that are facing shutdowns, that are facing disruptions, blocking, and filtering. That's certainly something that we need to tackle. We need to see here, and we need to bring to solutions. And that's a possible future to all of us if we go on the wrong path, if we make the wrong choices. And that's something that reminds me, 10 years ago, I attended the first IGF. It was the IGF in Rio in 2007. And I heard the wise words from Mr. Vint Cerf, who is here and can keep me on track. But he said, remember that the problems that we see on the internet are the same problems that we see on the society. So if you look into a mirror and you don't like what you see there, don't break the mirror. Don't break the internet. Keep it on. There are threats that raise our fears, but there is also hope. The internet is a force for good. It's a tool, it's a platform, it's where we can have opportunities, not only to share information, to build communities. It's really the place where you can find the new society, the new times for the society. But these hopes and fears, people's hopes and fears, are dividing us. We saw this very clearly on our report launched this year by Internet Society, the Global Internet Report, that I truly invite you to read. And it brings us to the fact that we have core values for the internet, and they remain valid. They remain what guarantees an open, global, resilient, and secure internet. I must say that I remember when the MAG were brainstorming around the title or the theme for this IGF. And Thomas insisted pretty clear on a few things, and I'm going to share two of them. The first one is the word your. Shape your digital future. That's something that matters to all of us, each of us. And then the exclamation point. You might have missed that, right? There is an exclamation point there. It's because the IGF calls for action. And that's also remaining for all of us. That's a responsibility to shape the future, our digital future. The technical community and the Internet society are with you on shaping this digital future. And more, we are strong supporters of the IGF. Nigel has pretty much said a lot about it, but over the years, this forum has demonstrated its value as a neutral forum where all stakeholders can gather on equal footing to discuss Internet issues. It has also grown, it has evolved, and it has developed its ability to deliver the tangible outcomes, to bring the concrete examples, the grassroots projects, through best practice forums, for example. Let's not underestimate this potential of the IGF. The multiplication of the national and regional IGFs, now the thematic IGFs for youth, for women IGFs. This type of discussions demonstrates the impact and the value of this model. Can the IGF improve? Of course. There is always room for improvement. And we heard that a lot on the last session. And that needs to be taken as a natural step for its evolution, bringing more voices to the table, including the remote ones, building more capacity and awareness among the users, influencing beneficial policies are some of the areas that needs to be further developed. It is my responsibility to do so as part of this community, but it's yours too. And so we can only do it together. IGF is about dialogue, it's about diversity, but it's much more. And we should trust our collective intelligence to overcome complex challenges. We can ensure that the IGF reaches the next level of its evolution and work together on developing a truly internet for everyone, everywhere. Now I'm just changing to French to say merci beaucoup à Genève et Suisse pour recevoir le Forum de gouvernance d'Internet et bonne fête à tout le monde. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ms. Lynn Saint-Amour, Chair of the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. Please, Lynn.
Thank you, Chengetai. And all four of those speeches were just excellent. And it's a really nice way to end the week here. So distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and I certainly hope friends, I'd like to thank Switzerland for a wonderful IGF. And of course, thank you to the United Nations Office of Geneva, UNOG, for hosting us here this week, and the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs for all of their support as the administrative home for the IGF, and of course, for everything the Secretariat specifically itself does here. I'd like to take a moment and really recognize Switzerland. They've been such a strong supporter of multi-stakeholder dialogue and internet governance since the very, very earliest days. They hosted the first World Summit on the Information Society, WSIS-1, in 2003. They facilitated the outcome that led to the creation of the Working Group on Internet Governance, WIGI, which led to a definition of internet governance that exists and today, and has certainly proved very, very useful. And they supported the creation of the IGF as a result of the second World Summit on the Information Society in Tunis in 2005. As host of UNOG here and many other IGOs and private institutions that deal with internet issues, Switzerland has a special responsibility to internet governance, and they have always taken this seriously and always been there. Importantly, they're active, vocal, and consistent supporters of the multi-stakeholder model. Finally, the Swiss government was, I believe, the first donor to the IGF's trust fund, supporting the Secretariat, which allowed the startup of the first IGF, which was held in 2006. So obviously we have very much to thank them for, and I really would like to give them a round of applause. Also warms my heart because I actually spent 22 years living here in Geneva, so just have always appreciated just the Swiss approach to so many things, and again, just unwavering support for all things internet governance. I'd also be remiss, though, if I didn't remind everyone that the IGF is an extra budgetary project of the United Nations under the Secretary General, yet it doesn't receive funding from the UN budget or from any of the member state contributions. It survives on donations. And obviously, as we've heard today, there's much, much more we can do, but it does depend on funding, and therefore, of course, contributions to the IGF Trust Fund are very welcome. But now moving to this year's IGF, we're just finishing year 2 of the 10-year mandate, and the MAG and the IGF community are working hard to advance key issues. So we, the multi-stakeholder advisory group, the IGF Secretariat, and of course you, the IGF community, continue to innovate in many of the core components of the IGF and the IGF ecosystem, while at the same time we're intensifying our efforts to produce ever more concrete outputs. Innovations such as the opening sessions, which Thomas talked about earlier, where we actually work towards a dialogue on a single theme, allowing key messages to be pulled from the discussion versus a long series of individuals and often somewhat unrelated statements. And we're working hard to introduce more active dialogue and open discussions in all the sessions held here, and promoting different and open formats. And also, as we heard today, there is still room to improve there. We captured key messages shortly after each main session for publication on the IGF website to ensure that the communication was easy to spread across the players and actors here, as well as outside, and certainly those will be fed into the usual chair report at the end of the meeting. There were other innovations as well, but in the interest of time, I'll leave that for a future report. If I can come to a moment for the intersessional activities, we created more space in the program for all the intersessional activities in the IGF. These activities are important as this work continues year-round, which allows more in-depth activities and allowing more progress, more participation on key issues. I'm referring to, of course, the work of the best practice forums, the dynamic coalitions, and of the major policy initiative, Connecting and Enabling the Next Billions. And one of the most impactful outcomes from the IGF activities or IGF ecosystem is the advent of the national, regional, sub-regional, and youth IGF initiatives, called NRIs for short. While the establishment of the NRIs was not foreseen by the Tunis Agenda, which of course gives the IGF its mandate, it did encourage multi-stakeholder engagement on national and regional levels. Because of this, several countries and regions started engaging stakeholders in their local communities in the IGF processes and organizing more annual IGF meetings at local levels. As somebody said earlier, you talk globally and act locally. So I think the NRIs are just making a very significant difference in the advancement of internet issues across the world. Currently, the total number of recognized NRIs is 97. There's another 10 in formation. They should be approved very shortly, which is nearly double the number of NRIs in just a little over 2 years. Really, really phenomenal work. And to that, I think we need to really recognize the support of Anya Gengo and the Secretariat as the NRI focal point. She's available 24/7, seriously. Of course, we need to recognize the work of all of the NRIs themselves as well, and their fearless and tireless champion, Marilyn Cade, who was instrumental in from the earliest days as well. So coming back to the point about intensifying our efforts to produce ever more concrete outputs, I believe that over time there's been a qualitative difference in the discussions themselves and in the supporting papers and the reports. But certainly it's not really about what I feel. I certainly hope that difference has been noticed and is shared. And at the same time, really sincere that we want to know how those can be improved. So please, suggestions, I think as Thomas said, and as was said earlier, we need to be a little courageous. We need to figure out where we can push, where we can advance. We need to pilot some things, and then we need to learn from those that work well and learn from those that don't work well. But it's certain that, maintaining what we're doing today will not advance our issues here and our success here as quickly as many of us would like. So while I believe no one would argue with the need to continually improve on delivering more concrete outputs, I also think we need to recognize, feel good about, as Wout said, celebrate, and certainly promote the value of the IGF as a platform for multi-stakeholder dialogue, as recognized in the Tunis Agenda. Sometimes I think we're almost apologetic that it's a platform for dialogue, and we really shouldn't be. Key discussions such as cybersecurity, human rights, Internet of Things, access, they've all been on the IGF agenda since the very, very earliest days, for 10, 12 years. Clearly those issues evolve, and our discussions are also evolving. Today's discussions on cybersecurity are very different from the discussions of 10 years ago. These issues are complex, they're often very nuanced, they clearly involve many different viewpoints, whether that's from different stakeholder groups or national or regional differences. It takes time to understand the different viewpoints and even more time to find commonality. I think helping to prove how important discussion in this forum is. At the same time, we've seen real concrete actions come out of the IGF. While it's not a place for binding decisions, it does very clearly inform actions that are taken back to the national and local level. Whether that's taken back through private sector activity or through government, civil society, technical or academic activities, or through some of the IGF intersessional activities, again, such as the best practice forums or the NRIs, there is clear action being driven from the discussions here. And I'm certain that will continue to evolve productively and positively. There have been a number of discussions over the week where it was said that advancing issues is a process. It starts with discussion. We look for commonality, some agreement, perhaps agree on a framework to advance the discussions further, or even propose some norms. Ultimately, if appropriate, they may become policy. One good example of this is the Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace, which earlier this week launched a norm on protecting the core of the public internet as the first building block in their efforts to help address cybersecurity issues. Equally importantly, by the way, the paper was one page, and the norm itself is one paragraph, which is another version of accessibility. So that to me is a clear action-oriented output. And I also believe the IGF is the only forum to address cybersecurity issues in a multi-stakeholder fashion. Having said that, I would have been happier to have been proved wrong. I believe all those cybersecurity efforts should be much more than largely one-stakeholder siloed efforts. And so I, for one, am glad that we give time to all these complex policy discussions. I'm glad WSIS 2, the Secretary General, member states, the community had the foresight to establish the IGF as a multi-stakeholder platform for dialogue. It would be a much scarier world without the IGF and the ability to have these debates, both here and through the NRIs. So with that, I feel I've probably already gone on far too long. I really would just like to thank the community, the MAG, the Secretariat, the host country, everybody that's participated or had any kind of touch on this IGF here over the year, and very much look forward to progressing some of the activities over the coming years, and certainly next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And now we'll have the MAG host country co-chair for 2017, Ambassador Thomas Schneider,
Thank you. And I said I will be brief. Just one point that I'd like to repeat from what I said before. I think we all realized again this year that the potential of the IGF is huge, it's unique, but at the same time it's still not fully used. So we really need more resources, we need better communication about the value of the IGF that leads to higher relevance, more awareness, and again, more resources. And just to quote again my friend Nigel, we need to fight, fight, fight. I don't shout this, but I mean it the same way like Nigel did for this, because there's no free lunch. Somebody needs to work, and then things happen. So, and the second thing is a message to those who are interested but still thinking about saying yes to host the next IGF. Also to those who haven't even started to think about but could actually also host the next IGF. It is hard work, that is true. But actually, and in particular, when you look back, there are other things that are more important than the hard work. It's a unique experience to organize an IGF. On the one hand, it's a unique experience to organize and achieve something working in a team or in different teams, sometimes under difficult circumstances for various reasons, but making things happen in the end that makes you stronger individually as a person with more stress resistance, maybe less doubt, less fears, but whether something goes right or not. It makes you definitely stronger as a team, and you may actually make new friends in these moments. That is one thing. And the other thing is, and this is amazing, is the people that come to you and tell you that they have really enjoyed the IGF, that they have learned new things, that they have been inspired by others, their horizon has been widened, and they look at least some things differently than they did before. And this is, I guess, the most important. So you will see happy faces, and everybody will love you, at least for a few days, but they will love you at the end of the IGF. And people will thank you also. And this is what I'm going to do now, and I'm closing with this. So first, I want to thank Lynn as the MAG chair. It was a pleasure to work with you. We had very inspiring and efficient and open-minded debates and a great cooperation. So thank you for this year. Of course, also the IGF Secretariat, Chengetai, Eleonora, Anya, Luis, and also Wim. I know that you work under severe conditions, again, mainly due to funding, and you did a tremendous job. Thanks also to Armin and Stan and everybody else at DESA who supported us throughout this year. Also Director General Müller and his team here at UNOC who supported us also from the beginning. That includes, of course, also technical staff, interpreters, security, the EBU, DevTV, and in particular the people from RTS who were extremely helpful and efficient in supporting us. Thanks also to the CERN for offering the visit that I hear that many of you have been profiting or will profit from seeing the CERN, which is a very interesting institution. An enormous thank to the GIP, Geneva Internet Platform, to Jovan, Roxana, Sorina, Stephanie, and all the others that I may forget. You were indispensable for us in the preparation and the conduction of the IGF, and we hope that you also will be able to support future hosts of the IGF. Thanks also for stepping in and organizing the volunteers for the remote participation, and we've said that before, this is a fundamental element of inclusivity. Thanks, of course, to my colleagues from Ofcom, Dominique, Livia, Nicolas, Jorge, and all the others that supported us, and that also had to bear with me in some difficult moments. Thanks also to Patrick and everybody else at the Swiss mission and the Foreign Ministry. It is amazing, and I can tell you it is possible that different ministries can work together without competition, but actually joining forces, and it's really a pleasure to work in a government where you can make this experience that we don't compete with each other, we actually work together. So thanks to everybody at the Foreign Ministry. And a particular thank to Philip, our Director General, and my boss at Ofcom for your commitment, personal commitment and support. And then finally, thanks to all of you. What we provided you here is an empty shell. It's rooms and technology, and you filled it with content, with life, with meaning, and with relevance. Thank you all very much.
Our final speaker is Mr. Armin Plum from the Division of Sustainable Development of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. And he is going to give the closing remarks on behalf of the United Nations Secretary General.
Thank you, Chengetai. Excellencies, distinguished participants, stakeholders participating online from around the world, it is my pleasure to be with you at this unique multi-stakeholder gathering and to deliver a message on behalf of my Undersecretary General, Mr. Liu, who is currently back in New York and sends his regrets. I quote, "On behalf of the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, I want to thank the Government of Switzerland for hosting the 12th annual meeting of the Internet Governance Forum here in Geneva. The United Nations is grateful for the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group for their guidance in preparing another great IGF. It also recognizes the valuable leadership and vision of the MAC Chair, Ms. Lynn Sintamur. This IGF is the outcome of the intensive work of a large group of people. The community worked tirelessly over the past months to prepare, and during the past 4 days to realize the IGF 2017. Thank you to the organizing team, its numerous volunteers, the staff at UNOC, so many others who have worked behind the scenes to make this happen. Key for the success of the IGF are the discussions and exchanges between its participants. So thank you to all of you, over 2,000 participants in Geneva, and those who joined us remotely for your active participation. You made this IGF meeting successful. We would like to acknowledge the work of now almost 100 national, regional, and youth IGF initiatives, and their many members that continue to expand the multi-stakeholder dialogue in the spirit of the global IGF by convening their own meetings and discuss and address local, national, and regional internet governance challenges and opportunities. Through the collaboration between the NRIs and the global IGF, local and regional views feed into the global IGF and enrich our discussions and deliberations here. We should also acknowledge the IGF community intersessional work channeled through the best practices forums, dynamic coalitions, and the initiative to develop policy recommendations for connecting and enabling the next billions. These are fundamental in the ongoing drive to make the IGF more outcome-oriented and deliver true bottom-up and multi-stakeholder outputs. An inclusive, safe, and secure internet, whose benefits are enjoyed equally in the developed and developing countries, is a shared responsibility for all of us. Bridging the digital divide remained one of the key topics of this year's IGF. Similarly, the Sustainable Development Goals continue to provide a framework for dialogue on economic development, human rights, freedom of expression, and gender parity online. What we see is that the IGF continues to grow as an open and inclusive discussion platform. Its growth is not only measured in the number of people or stakeholder groups who attend this meeting, but also in the ever-increasing array of topics that get discussed in the internet governance context. Artificial intelligence, disinformation, blockchain technologies, the Internet of Things, virtual reality, these are all new or emerging issues that were explored in this year's IGF. We can expect that over the course of the next year, developments in digital policy will mean this list will expand. It is therefore critical that we maintain the multi-stakeholder community's commitment to improving on the IGF and to bringing new voices and ideas. We must ensure that everybody participates in shaping the digital future. Thank you, all of you, for your contributions for another successful IGF. We look forward to working with you alongside over the coming year. Thank you. I'm actually supposed to use the gavel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a safe travels home, and I hope some of you will stay a day or two to see Geneva. Thank you very much. Thank you.